Good morning. Lovely to see you this morning and welcome to Penn Vicarage today, which is Thursday. I hope you're well and cheerful and looking forward to a good day today. If I may just quickly continue a plug for Carols on the Doorstep, 6th of December. I'll be sending a flyer out in the next couple of days. Do please, when the flyer comes out, do please share it with your friends. Let's let lots of people sing on the doorstep, 6th of December, 5:30 in the evening, and let's make the streets of Penn throng with Christmas cheer. 6th of December. But to our adventure through the book of Revelation. And the good news is, friends, we are now halfway through. So the end is now in sight. Quick recap, if I may, just so you know where we are in the book. Chapter 1, Introduction. Chapter 2 and 3, Letters to Churches in Western Turkey. Chapter 4, Vision of God over his creation. Chapter 5, God has a scroll with 7 seals in it, and Jesus is pronounced worthy to open the seals. Chapter 6 and 7, we have the seals being opened. Chapters 8 to 11, we have 7, after the half-hour break, we have 7 trumpets being blown. And yesterday, in chapter 11, we had the 7th trumpet, you might say the last trump, and that's what we're picking up on today. So, Revelation chapter 12, seatbelts on, hard hats to the ready, here goes. Revelation chapter 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so she can be nourished for 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, and they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now of the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our comrades has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. They have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness to her place, where she's nourished for a time and times and half a time. But then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the woman was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, what a reading. I mentioned a few days ago that this book of Revelation is absolutely rammed full of Old Testament references and allusions. Well, chapter 12, even John excels himself. This is just absolutely rammed to the measure of Old Testament. I'm only going to scratch the surface, but I'll just tell you 2 or 3 things this morning. Firstly this, as I've been mentioning, there has been something of a countdown, right, for starting with before. So in chapter 6, we had lots of 4s. We had 4 horsemen. We had court measures. We had a quarter of the earth, 4. In chapter 8, we had lots of 3s. So we had 1/3 of the earth, 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the light. And so lots of 3s being mentioned in chapter 8. In chapter 11, yesterday, we had lots of 2s. 2 lampstands, 2 witnesses, 2 olive trees, lots of 2s. You've got 4, 3, 2. And today comes the end of the count. Today we get to number 1. And interestingly enough, this is God's main event. This is that we've all been counting down to. And bear in mind all the portents we've seen, all the kind of lights from heaven and the and the fire and the tempest and all the stuff that's been going on. What is God's main event here? Some latest nuclear missile? No. What is God's main event? The birth of a baby. And that, I think, is the main message of this morning's reading. We've been counting down in heaven. 4, 3, 2, 1. And this is the big one. This baby is the big one. And I don't mean he was 11 pounds born. This baby is God's main event. This is what everything has been counting down to. Jesus, the coming of Jesus, the birth, life, death, resurrection, ascension, and glorification of Jesus, they are the main event of the world. And that's the number one. That's what God wants us to see this morning. So, that's the first thing. This baby is God's main event. Second thing is, who is everybody in this story this morning? The baby. Well, the baby is clearly Jesus. The dragon, that's supposed to be the reptile, supposed to be the serpent. The dragon is clearly supposed to be Satan in some way, shape or form. Satan might use other people to try and, like Herod, to try and kill the baby and so on. But nonetheless, the serpent, the dragon, is clearly Satan in some way, shape or form. The interesting question more is, who is the woman? Because we're not actually given her name. And there are various candidates. One candidate, of course, obviously, is Mary. Makes sense. We'll have what she's the one who gave birth to Jesus. And it's wonderful to know that Jesus was born of a woman. Jesus was fully human as well as fully God. And the fact that she was chosen by God for fully God's purposes is a fantastic thing. So she could be Mary. But it's not an exact match, because we don't see any evidence that Mary was taken into the wilderness, that she went away on wings of eagles, or was protected for 1,260 days. So there's aspects of Mary, possibly, but it's not an exact match. Another possibility could be that the woman is somehow metaphorically the church. We talk about Mother Church and so on. Again, possibilities, but that's not an exact match either, because I can't quite see how the church can give birth to Jesus. I think in some ways Jesus gave birth to the church, but there are aspects, because it does talk about the faithful people of God. And I do think there's something in that, those who keep the commandments and so on. So it could be, there's things to be gained from thinking about the woman as being the church. Another possibility could be that she could be some variation of Eve. Now, again, there are possibilities here, partly because she gave birth in agony, which something refers to the Book of Eden. You've also got to remember that Eve and the serpent, you might say they have history, haven't they, back in the Book of Revelation. So this could be demonstrating the fact that by what happened here is reversing what Eve did by being tempted and falling by the temptation in the Book of Genesis. There's a possibility there. Another possibility, of course, is that could be that the woman is referred to the Jewish people. Again, there's possibilities here because Jesus was Jewish. Jesus' mother and father were Jewish, and Joseph and Mary were both Jewish. And you could say that Jesus was a proper Jewish boy brought from you might say, the bosom of Judah. Ultimately, friends, we don't know. It could be we're not told the name deliberately, because it could be that we're supposed to benefit from all those things. To know that the birth of this child does undo what Eve did, that we are part of the faithful people of God, that Jesus is fully human, born of a woman, and it could be we're meant to hear all those things. And that's what I like to think, actually, that we gain from all those wonderful things. But I'll let you get answers in the postcard to which one you think it is. But I'd like to finish with a slight irony this morning, because actually, I'm in the middle of preparing all sorts of carol services and Christmas services and so on. And it's all about babies in mangers, and it's all very sweet and cuddly with shepherds and kings and all this type of stuff that we do every year. And it's all great fun. But what's interesting from this reading this morning, we've got the birth of this baby, that there may have been peace on earth, but there certainly was war in heaven. And I do slightly amusing sometimes whether we could do a sort of Revelation version of the Nativity. What that would look like. I think we're going to get Steven Spielberg in for that one. But it could be quite an interesting thing. But I think what it's trying to say is that, come back to what I said originally, which is that the birth of this child is God's main event. The birth of this baby is God's rescue plan for the world. The birth of this baby is what puts the world right. And Satan, who put the world wrong, is not happy about it. And what you have here, if you like, is Custer's, a bit like Custer's last stand. You got Satan's last stand. But the people reading this morning who put their faith in Jesus, who will know that they put their faith in Jesus and they've encountered opposition. But the great news is from this reading is that Satan has had his day, that the victory of God is with us. These people here won through because they won through the victory of the blood of the Lamb. In Jesus is the final victory. Heaven is coming. God is winning. And by being in Jesus and with Jesus on God's side, the victory is right. Good comes through in the end. Light conquers darkness. Good conquers evil. And Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So this Christmas, let's worship this baby.